Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirбhavati bharata abhyutanamdharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirбhavati bharata abhyutanamdharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirбhavati bharata abhyutanamdharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirбhavati bharata abhyutanamdharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirбhavati bharata abhyutanamdharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirбhavati bharata abhyutanamdharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanartaya Narayana Sambhavami Yuge Yuge.
Kayena vacha manasendriyeva puryatmanava prakrite svabhava karomi aryat sakaram parasmai Narayanayeti samarpayami
Kayena vacha manasendriyeva buddhyatmanava prakrite svabhava karomi aryat sakalam parasmai Narayanayeti samarpayami
Kayena vacha manasendriyeva puryatmanava prakrite svabhava karomi aryat sakaram parasmai Narayanayeti samarpayami
Kayena vacha manasendriyeva buddhyatmanava prakrite svabhava karomi aryat sakalam parasmai Narayana samarpayami.
Kayena vacha manasendriyeva Puryatmana va prakriti svabhava Karomi aryat sakam parasmai Narayanayeti samarpayami
Kayena vacha manasendriyerva buddhyatmana va prakriter svabhavat karomi aryat sakalam parasmai Narayanayeti samarpayami.
Jaya Shriman Narayana.
Jaya Shriman Narayana. And everyone together. Jaya Shriman Narayana.
Jaya Shriman Narayana.
Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna.
Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna.
Jaya Shri Guru.
Jaya Shri Guru.
Sanatana Dharma Jayate.
Sanatana Dharma Jayate.
Dharma Rashtra Jayate.
Dharma Rashtra Jayate.
Suravangsha Jayate.
Surya Vangsha Jayate.
International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate.
International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate.
Om Hri Om. Very good. Namaste, everyone. It is absolutely my pleasure, my honor, truly my privilege to be here with you today on this Sunday. And we are continuing with our live stream that we do every Sunday. This is presented and brought to you by the International Sanatana Dharma Society, a worldwide movement with people all throughout the world, all throughout literally every nation of Europe, throughout much of Asia, Latin America, etc., certainly North America, certainly America, Canada, etc., even Iceland, quite literally throughout the world, Australasia. We have serious devotees of the ISDS throughout the world. and you are joining us for our live satsanga here at our headquarters, our beautiful temple headquarters here in what we call the Vedic heartland, and that is in Omaha, Nebraska, USA. So again, welcome to everyone. As people know, people who attend regularly these live streams that we do, what we do here on this channel is rather different from even other similar channels where it is purported that the channels are devoted to teaching Sanatana Dharma, teaching the Vedic tradition, teaching quote-unquote Hinduism, etc., etc. And what we do is indeed quite different. And sadly, it's very exciting on the one hand that is the case. On the other hand, of course, it's a little bit sad, because what we do is actually something very simple. It's actually not something very, very difficult on the face of it. And that is, what we do is we examine, and in a way with true fidelity and devotion, the Vedic scriptures. We don't examine them as world literature. We don't examine them in an academic way. We don't examine them as just interesting books. Rather, we examine the Vedic scriptures as the very foundation of a reality, of all true spirituality, of all true philosophy, in the true meaning of that word. And we understand the true meaning of the word philosophy. And we study the Vedic scriptures as the very foundation of our religion of Sanatana Dharma. That being the case, we study the Vedic scriptures in a very authentic, very traditional, very orthodox sort of way. We truly try to understand not how we wish to interpret the Vedic scriptures in accordance with our egoic attempts to try to create philosophical castles in the sky, but rather we try to examine the Vedic scriptures in accordance with the Vedic scriptures, understanding the Vedic scriptures as what? Shabda, the word of God, literally. And this is what we do with this channel. It's not exclusively what we do, which is nice also. We do a variety of things, but all of which are aligned with indeed the pure teachings of the Vedic scriptures. Well, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be starting yet another series. You know, that's another thing, is when I say we examine the Vedic scriptures, I mean, in the past, we've taken one verse and examined that verse for the totality of a live stream, so for like an hour. We really examine the Vedic scriptures from every legitimate angle imaginable, every legitimate angle. And indeed, as a result, we have now quite a few series where we examine different Vedic scriptures, either an entire scripture if it's small, or important portions of a Vedic scripture. Well, we're going to be doing that again today. And what we're going to be looking at very specifically is the most, arguably, the most, certainly one of the most. I would be in the latter camp. I wouldn't call it necessarily the most, but way up there, one of the most philosophically important parts of Rig Veda. The Rig Veda is one of the four Vedas, one of the four Veda Samhitas, and it is comprised of hymns. Rig Veda, very specifically, is understood to be one of the most important scriptures within Sanatana Dharma. Despite that fact, of course, it is not very well understood by practitioners of Sanatana Dharma, by scholars, academicians, let's say authorities of South Asian studies, what used to be called Indology 100 years ago. I feel sorry for people who still call it that, Indology. But indeed, it is scarcely understood even by individuals who are like this, who are scholars. They understand it even less, actually, than many practitioners. Rig Veda is a work which in itself can be studied for almost all of one's lifetime. It's a massive work. It is 10 mandalas, 10 books, one could say, and there are well over 1,000 hymns within Rig Veda. And again, this is one of four Vedas. So with Rig Veda, very specifically, these are indeed mostly hymns to the various gods and goddesses of Sanatana Dharma. And that's what most of it is, are hymns of praise. Rig, from irch, meaning to praise. So there is the element of bhakti that is there within Rig Veda. Oh, indeed, there are some, how can we state this charitably? Philosophical pipsqueaks who are very, 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 very recent individuals who will claim, having not knowing Vedic Sanskrita, which this may surprise the audience, I don't talk about this a lot. I know both classical Sanskrita perfectly, actually, but I also have studied Vedic Sanskrita formally. I even know what is sometimes called Buddhist hybrid Sanskrita. I'm sure very few people in the audience have even heard of that, but I actually studied even that a little bit, actually. But when it comes to understanding the Sanskrita of the Rig Veda, it's quite difficult. It's not an easy thing. As a result, the translations are not very good, unfortunately, into the English language. People always ask me, what is a good translation of Rig Veda? And I will answer them something to the effect, it has not arrived yet in English, in the English language. It will, but it has not yet arrived. But when it comes to Rig Veda, indeed, this is a work that is very scarcely understood. And the reason why is for several reasons. First of all, while there is actual intellectual philosophical content that is there, Rig Veda, more than anything, are again hymns. Hymns. Again, getting back to Rich. Rich means to praise, to have adoration toward, but verbally so. This being the case, as I was saying, there are some very recent, being charitable, intellectual pipsqueaks who will say, when you look at the Rig Veda, there is no bhakti that is there. There is no devotion that is there. Bhakti, they'll go along the lines of atheistic modern academicians. These are people who have surrendered themselves, heart, mind, and soul to modernity. They'll say, this bhakti thing, this is more recent. This is more recent. You don't find evidence of this in the Rig Veda. Rich, to praise, to adore, to worship, etc., which is what that Sanskrita word in the Vedic Sanskrita means. And what's interesting, of course, is that the entire Rig Veda is predicated upon adoration and devotion. And yet, despite this fact, of course, they'll say there is no devotion. That would be akin to saying, yes, the academician smoking his little pipe and the fake yogi following like a little lapdog, what the academician says, yes, and smoking on his pipe. When you read the Yoga Sutras, there's not really much about yoga in there. Smoking his pipe. Silly. Absolutely silly. Rig Veda is a devotional work. That is the entire point. That's why you don't find much of overt philosophical content within Rig Veda, or any of the four Vedas for that matter. So this is why when you do find something that is overtly philosophical, this comes to people's attention. Well, what we're going to be looking at today is indeed one of the most important, some argue the most important, philosophical section of Rig Veda. This is known as Purusha Sukta. Purusha Sukta. And this is in the 10th mandala, or the last mandala, the last book, and chapter 90 of that book. And it's 24 hymns. People will even debate how many hymns there are. There are 24, period. That's it. That's the number. The reason why people are sometimes confused is because the Purusha Sukta is also repeated in the other Vedas as well. But when it is, it's derivative of the original in the Rig Veda. So therefore, in the other Vedas, sometimes it won't have the full thing. It'll have, 16 of the 24, etc. So rather than understanding the idea of chronology, people will surrender to confusion. What does this mean? Oh my Lord, so therefore no one must know how many verses there are. No, there are 24 verses of Purusha Sukta. But again, it's repeated in later Vedas, Vedas that were revealed sequentially later. That being the case, they will quote Purusha Sukta, but it's a quote. They won't have the entire thing. They'll have 16, 18, varying numbers. You also see the Purusha Sukta, for that matter, replicated in Srimad Bhagavatam. And again, not the entire thing. But in the second canto, you have Purusha Sukta and elements of Purusha Sukta. You have it in the Mahabharata. You have it in many different places. So indeed, these are 24 important verses that we are going to examine over the course of the next, several weeks. Now, all this being said, very briefly, let me talk about what this Purusha Sukta is about. First of all, Sukta. Sukta simply means, again, a hymn of praise. That's what Sukta also means. In addition to rich, there are many different words for this. Well, Sukta is yet another. It's a specific sort of literary construct for praise. And then Purusha. What is meant by Purusha? The literal translation of Purusha is person. And then, taken within the proper context, you understand who that person is. Because within the Vedic scriptures, all throughout the Vedic scriptures, everything from, again, the Purusha Sukta itself, all the other scriptures I mentioned, many of the Yoga Sutras, within the context of Sankhya philosophy, etc., all throughout, you'll hear this term again and again and again, Purusha, Purusha, Purusha. And sometimes it was referring to just a typical person. I am a Purusha. You are a Purusha. Depending on the context, however, sometimes it is speaking about the highest Purusha, that is the supreme person, God. What nicely Prabhupada, he translates two things, Bhagavan and Purusha, as supreme personality of Godhead. Well, this also is what is meant by this term Purusha. In this context, it is quite apparent, no one disputes this, and I mean no one, that what is being spoken of is God when we use the term Purusha in this Purusha Sukta. So this is a construct of 24 verses that is a hymn that is praising the supreme person. That is the translation of Purusha, not anything else. Again, I know the Sanskrit, the classical, the Vedic, the Buddhist hybrid does not apply, but that's all right. Purusha means supreme person. Now, within this context, when the term Purusha as supreme person is being used, it's being used in a very specific way. And this is what makes this Purusha Sukta itself very interesting, but also a little bit challenging for people, because it's not simply talking about God or the supreme person in a generic sense, but a very specific aspect of the supreme person. Indeed, as an aside, for people who saw the interview that Arval did with me at this point almost a month ago on his channel. The channel is simply called Arval. He asked me about this. We spoke about this actually. And that is, and I'll paraphrase what he asked me. Basically, what is the cosmic memory of the universe? So not just the individual memory that each of us has as individual persons, but what is that cosmic memory that is there that remembers all things from all times within a given Brahmanda or universe? And when he asked me that, I explained Purusha. Because this is what the idea of Purusha is. Again, not just God in general, but God very specifically in relation to the material cosmos. And that means both materiality itself as a force, as an energy, as a Shakti, as a power, but also within a given universe. That is, what is that spirit? What is that aspect of God that is there within the universe? Well, this is what he asked me about, and this is what I explained to him in very great, truly philosophical depth, to the point where he was very appreciative. This is what we're talking about here. What the Purusha Sukta is talking about is that aspect of God that forms essentially the Atman, the soul of our universe, and then by extension, any universe. Now, let me go a little bit deeper to explain this. I'm going to first explain what the Purusha Sukta is saying in summation, and before we go into the Purusha Sukta. So, every Brahmanda, every universe has really, metaphysically speaking, two distinct aspects. On the one hand, there is the materiality that is there. What is meant by the materiality? Everything that is, interestingly, both perceptual and even conceptual is considered to be materiality, is considered to be prakriti, to state it in Sankhyan terms. But then there is a second aspect, and what is that aspect? It is God as God is permeating all of reality in the form of his own consciousness. And thus, both informing that reality, giving meaning to that reality, and more, giving that reality its very possibility of existence. So God as sustainer. Now we hear this all the time. Oh, God sustains reality. Well, what is meant by this? Given any specific Brahmanda, any specific universe, let's say, you have a universe. You have another universe, another, etc. You have all these universes. Well, there are two aspects. There's the material aspect, but then behind that there's God. That is the aspect of pure, not just consciousness, but God himself. Both are present. Obviously, for illusioned beings, we can only perceive the material reality, but God is there nonetheless. When we speak of any Brahmanda, not Brahmanda, when we speak of any mandala, and I spoke about this also on with that interview with Arval. When we speak of any self-sufficient unit, there is the external and the internal. Whether we're talking about a person, what is a person? Physical body, but with soul within. That is imperceivable, but there nonetheless. There is a spirit of a family. You can see the family. Oh, this family has 5 people. Here's 3 people, etc. There is a spirit to that family. There is a spirit to the nation. There is a spirit to a planet. There is a spirit ultimately, not ultimately, but within the context of materiality. There is a spirit of a universe itself. So there is the physical aspect, that is Prakriti. But then there is Purusha in this context. That is, that hidden self of the universe itself that sustains the universe, that gives the universe purpose, that gives the universe meaning, that gives the universe its very existence itself. This is known in the Sanskrita as Sharira Shariran. That is, you have the outer form and the possessor, the controller of that outer form. Now, with all this understanding, and I'm going through this very quickly, with all this understanding, now we can begin to understand what is being spoken of when we speak of God in this aspect of God as Purusha. That there is the material universe, which forms, one could say, the outer layer, but then that inner layer that you cannot see as God, that is sustaining it. This is what is being spoken of by Purusha. All right, so this is an aspect of God. More, it's not a mystery who God is in accordance with, let's say, the philosophical system of the Purusha Sukta, of these 24 verses. It's not up to speculation. This is the tradition for as long as the Purusha Sukta has been around. There are secondary literatures that make this extremely clear, meaning secondary verses, other scriptures that make this very clear. So again, Srimad Bhagavatam, Mahabharata, etc. That Purusha is Vishnu, Narayana. And it says this again and again and again in these secondary scriptures, these other scriptures outside of the Purusha Sukta of the Rig Veda. So all this being said, again, it is quite clear that this Purusha is Narayana. It's not anyone else. It's not Shiva, it's not Durga, it's not this person, that person, etc., etc. Rather, it is Narayana. So all that being said, again, there's a lot that is here. This Purusha Sukta has been foundational to many, many, many important philosophical constructs and even other scriptures that came after. Indeed, this includes even the Sankhya school of philosophy, which today is scarcely understood by most. Now, all of this being said, that was the briefest introduction that I could give to what is the Purusha Sukta. Now, what I would like us to do is indeed to comment on the Purusha Sukta. This is the last thing I'll say before we jump into the commentary, actually. What we are going to see is that many of the philosophical principles that we follow as followers of Sanatana Dharma, but also that we find in many of the other Vedic scriptures as well, you will recognize here in the Purusha Sukta. And again, what does this show? This shows what I've been emphasizing these days, something that I've really always emphasized, but I'm hyper-emphasizing it these days and for very pointed reason. The Vedic scriptures are not at odds with each other. They're not at war with each other. They're not contradictory. When you read, at least when an intelligent person reads, the Vedic scriptures, anything from the 4 Veda Samhitas throughout the Aranyakas, the Brahmanas, the Upanishads, the Shveta Tantra, the true Sattvika Tantrika literature, when you read the Itihasas such as Mahabharata, Ramayana, when you read the Puranas, the Dharma Shastras, when you read the Sutra literature such as Yoga Sutras, Narada Bhakti Sutras, Brahma Sutras, etc., etc., when you read the Pancharatra literature, and shall I go on with genre after genre, when you read all these genres of literature and all the individual components thereof, what do you find? You find that the totality of the Vedic scriptures are in absolute agreement. An individual scripture, as I've said 1,000 times, may have its own specific emphasis. That is perfectly fine. Because one scripture is about something specific, another one is about something else specific, that doesn't mean that they are necessarily contradicting one another. But rather, all of the Vedic scriptures speak with what? One voice. One voice, one voice. One voice. Now, let us proceed. So this is the 10th mandala, 90th chapter, and this is verse 1. And this is what is known as the Purusha Sukta. And it proceeds in this way. The Purusha, the Supreme Person, has 1,000 heads, 1,000 eyes, and 1,000 feet. He has enveloped this world from all sides, and has even transcended it by 10 finger lengths, or inches. Very nice. This is a very, for people who like literature, for people who really enjoy literature, poetry, literature, epic literature, etc., etc. This is very nicely constructed because, of course, in this case, and I've said this before, the vast majority of Vedic scriptures we have to take literally. There's no, from the vast majority of Vedic literature, especially when we're speaking philosophically, there is no, oh, well, it's just symbol, it's open to interpretation. Nonsense. The vast majority is straightforward. A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D, and if you follow D, you will have E. That's simple. That's how the Vedic literature works. However, I've said this a million times, I've written about this in the Vedic way of knowing God, that, oh, there's a minority, certainly, of scriptures that is meant to be symbolic, and when that is the case, it is made very obvious. It's made very obvious. The reason why is because with that specific construct that is there, that is indeed purposefully and consciously, symbolically constructed to explain the superlative or to explain the furthest extent to which that concept is being spoken is an impossibility. Therefore, you give hints to that. That is what this verse is doing. So the Supreme Person has 1,000 heads. Really? Not 1,001? Why stop at 1,000? This is meant to be taken symbolically. In fact, it's actually symbolism within symbolism within symbolism. But let's start first with the first layer of true symbolism that is here. First of all, what of course is meant by 1,000 heads is an infinite number of heads, not just 1,000. Because, oh, if you find another being who has 1,001 heads, well, that person's superior to the Supreme Person. You see how silly this then ends up. No. Again, a person has to be honest. Let me pause for a moment and repeat this. This is why a person has to be honest when they engage in the philosophic enterprise, and especially when they try to understand the Vedic scriptures. If a person points to this and says, oh, but wait a minute, it's saying God has only 1,000 heads. Be quiet. Be quiet, please. You're not understanding. We understand, we get it. No, God has an infinite number of everything. Indeed, every auspicious attribute is contained within God, an unlimited number of auspicious attributes, and qualitatively to an unlimited depth. This is our understanding of God. This is the nature of God. That being the case, don't get hung up on the number, 1,000. God has unlimited heads, and then more, unlimited eyes, and unlimited feet. Now, that's the first layer of symbolism. Let's go a little bit deeper. Literally, God has an unlimited number of heads. Is that what this verse is really trying to explain? So, yes, when you sit and you meditate upon God, think of someone who has a small body, an unlimited number of heads. Try to envision that. Really, that's what the verse is saying? Is it pointing literally to heads? No. What it is trying to point out in this entire construct is that God is indeed unlimited. We have one head, the typical human being. A few beings have more, but the typical human being has one head. Brahma, who's the creator of this universe, has four. Even that's nothing. God has an unlimited number of heads. Now, what of course is meant by this? This means, of course, that God is unlimited in every degree. There is a modern philosophical term for this, is omnicompetent. That God is omnicompetent, that there is nothing that is outside of God's scope of doing, of knowing, of doing, of, and then fill in the blank of any positive attributive feature that God can have. So indeed, God is an omnicompetent being. There is nothing that is outside the scope of what God can do. So this is what is meant by this, that this is the nature of God. God is unlimited. But now, going deeper, we're going to go to the second sentence now. He has enveloped this world from all sides. Let's stop there. What we are going to see, we're going to see over the course of examining these 24 verses of the Purusha Sukta, we are going to see several very recognized, at least if we follow the ISDS and how we teach authentic Sanatana Dharma, or if you read the other Vedic scriptures, you're going to see several very recognizable philosophical ideas, constructs, principles that are here. This is one of them, panentheism. The idea of panentheism. The idea that God is, on the one hand, absolutely immanent within the world, that is, there's no place that God is not. On the other hand, God fully transcends materiality. We're going to see this throughout the Purusha Sukta, beginning with this second verse, this second sentence of this first verse. So, God has enveloped this world from all sides. What does this mean? God interpenetrates all of reality. He interpenetrates all of reality. That means there is no place within materiality where God is not. So he envelops this world from all sides. Now, this part is interesting, and has even transcended it by, and the Vedic scriptures are being very, very specific here, by 10 fingers length, that is 10 inches. So, you look at a universe, at a full universe, with Brahma at the top, with the Naraka regions and the ocean below, etc. You look at a full universe. God interpenetrates all things within the universe, again, invisibly so. It is as if God is the soul and the universe is his body. And that's not literally the case, but this is, again, sharira shariran. This is a symbolic way of understanding. God is within all of reality, material reality of that universe, giving it its very existence. If God were not there, the universe would not exist. So God is there, but at the same time, this verse and this last sentence ends in a very interesting way. It's making a deep philosophical point, but it's doing it almost with humor. Oh, God interpenetrates all of reality. There's no place within the material world where God is not. Oh, and not only that, he extends beyond the universe by 10 inches. Fascinating. Fascinating. Amazing to think about this. Now, what of course is this pointing to? God's transcendent nature as well. So in other words, is God within the universe? Yes. Now, if you stopped there, what would you be? Philosophically. Let me give you a hint. It starts also with a P, and it sounds like panentheistic, but it's not.
Pantheistic.
You would be pantheistic. So, in other words, you would say that the totality of all things in the universe, all added up together, equals God, and God equals the totality of all things in the universe added up together. That's pantheism. That's saying that the universe is God and God is the universe. That's silly. I studied probably the most preeminent pantheist in Western philosophy very, very deeply, and that's Spinoza, Baruch Spinoza. I studied him very deeply to the point of writing a very vast philosophical paper that no one has seen about him, and basically demolishing pantheism. I also do so in right here, actually, Sanatana Dharma, the Eternal Natural Way, where I talk about the idea of pantheism and how it absolutely falls apart if you say that quite literally the universe is God, God is the universe. Then it makes God dependent. It takes away all of God's transcendent and eternal and perfect qualities, to state it very simply. The Purusha Sukta does not fall into the trap of pantheism. It is rather panentheistic. So while on the one hand it is explaining that God necessarily interpenetrates all material reality within the universe, God is not constrained by that materiality, but transcends it at the same time. So God is immanent, yet transcendent at the same time. So indeed, this is why when you study the Purusha Sukta, this is indeed one of the most philosophical aspects of Rig Veda. So now we have several things established here. We have the infinitude of God, the transcendence of God, and we have the panentheistic relationship of God with that which is created by God. All right, let's go on now. Now we're going to look at verse 2 of the Purusha Sukta. And it proceeds in this way. All this is verily the Purusha, all that which existed in the past or will come into being in the future is also the Purusha. Also he is the Lord of immortality. That which grows profusely by food is also the Purusha. Very nice. So this is also a very interesting, indeed deeply philosophical verse. This can be understood again by looking at this all-important philosophical concept, this relational concept of sharira, shariran. Let me back up for a moment. When it comes to understanding philosophy, we have to understand that any philosophy that is worth its salt, and I've said this many times, and not just me, any real philosopher knows this actually, any philosophical system that is worth its salt is indeed a system. What is meant by this is that it necessarily addresses every single aspect of reality, from metaphysics to epistemology to ontology to divine ontology, to then getting down to more nitty-gritty things such as ethics, aesthetics, etc., even politics. So in other words, a true philosophy is necessarily a world-encompassing system that leaves nothing out. Well, the idea of relational philosophy, that is how one thing relates to another, especially when you're talking about things that are ontologically distinct. And really, it's difficult to understand even how ontologically distinct entity A can even relate to ontologically distinct entity B. How do they relate if they don't even touch, in other words? Well, that's relational philosophy. Relational philosophy is not a philosophical system in and of itself. Rather, what it is a subset of actual philosophy. You can't take that subset and say, oh, this is my philosophical system. No, it's a subset, if people understand what I mean. The sciences work the same way. Anything that involves human intelligence works in this way. So with that understanding, when it comes indeed to relational philosophy, there are several ways in which we can understand how God relates to that which is not God, that which is the creature of God, that which is the creation versus the ultimate creator, not Brahma, but God. And in understanding the relationship between the two, indeed, this is one way in which we need to understand. I keep using this term, sharira, shariran. What is meant by this is that, again, there is the relationship between internal and external among all living beings. Again, human being, there is the internal and the external. And they're not equal. They're vastly unequal. You look at me, which you are now. You see, what do you see? You see what you can see, quite literally what you can perceive. You are seeing what you're seeing with the eye. You're hearing what you can hear with the ear. If you were here, you could touch me, etc. You are viewing me via your senses. But what are you seeing? The external of who I am. And the external is secondary in every sense, including of importance. It is secondary to that which is the internal. What is the internal? What is inside? Atman, the soul, the spirit. We see this with just a regular human being. I explained before that really you can see this with all living mandalas, all self-sustaining units. You can see this with the universe itself. You also can see this with God vis-a that which proceeds from God, the fully independent versus the dependent, the unconditional versus the conditional, that it is always the former that is of importance, the latter is subservient to the former. So the body is subservient to me, who I am within here. I dictate what my body will do, etc. The external exists to serve my soul, to serve who I am within, etc. In the same way, that is what this entire verse is saying about the relationship between God and the material world. Now let me ask, again, just giving this example of myself as the physical body, but also the soul that is within. Which is primary? The soul. But more, in a deeply, deeply personal, philosophical, and spiritual sense, when you're encountering me, you see, right now, this is true for the people who are here, for our congregation. This is especially true for the people watching right now, because all you can do is see me and hear me. So you can encounter the physical aspect of me even less than the people here. They could come up and touch me, etc. But when you are encountering me, are you really encountering primarily the physical or the spiritual? Answer this carefully. When you encounter me, are you encountering primarily the physical or the spiritual? Don't be afraid to answer. You'll get it right. There you go. I knew you were going to get it right. You just saw the gravity of the question, and it paralyzed you. You're encountering the spiritual. You see, if my spirit were gone, would you really be encountering me? No. You'd be encountering a dead body, which you would quickly want to get away from. So in the same way, when we view reality, we are viewing not just the external, but for individuals who especially are God conscious in any legitimate way, we are encountering God. So therefore, for the spiritual person, when we look at the creation, when we look at nature, etc., well, in our mind, what we are encountering is God. Oh, we understand the external, but more importantly, we understand that beyond it all is God. So therefore, all this is verily the Purusha. This is the perspectival difference of the liberated being versus a common individual. That is, for the liberated being, when they encounter especially all that which is natural, other living beings, nature itself, etc., to their perspective, they see God behind all things. An atheist will go deep into nature, and they'll see beautiful mountains and a grand vista, and they'll look and they'll slightly appreciate it. Oh yes, that pleases my senses so much. That's so nice. That's really how the atheist thinks. When the spiritual person looks at that same vista of nature, they see God smiling at them. And in this case, not symbolically, quite literally, they will see God smiling at them. So it's an amazing thing. This is how the yogi, the sage, views things. All this is verily that supreme being, that supreme person. All that which existed in the past or will come into being in the future. So first we talked about all things spatially, as far as actual material content. Now we're talking about time, all that which existed in the past within this material world. Or that will come into being in the future, is also the Purusha, is also that supreme being. Again, this is also the perspective of the sage. Now, I said very quickly, oh, this is talking about the material world. How do we know this? By looking at this sentence. All that which existed in the past, or will come into being in the future. This necessarily equates to materiality, because it is only material things that disappear, and therefore you have to relegate them to the past, to memory, if you're fortunate enough to have memory of things that have perished, or that will come into being. It is only within the context of materiality that things come into being. Within the realm of transcendence, things do not come into being, they simply are. They have being itself. They don't come into being. So thus, this is speaking still about this relationship of the material universe, a Brahmanda, vis-a-vis Purusha, vis-a-vis God. So all that which existed in the past or will come into being in the future is also the Purusha. So God is behind all things. So again, this is the difference. An atheist will look at the most beautiful phenomenon in nature and just say, oh yes, oh, those atoms came together so nicely that it pleases my sense of sight. And then they'll go off and, hit a puppy in the head or whatever atheists do. But on the other hand, individuals who are spiritual, they'll see that same beauty of nature, and they understand. They quite literally have that divine vision that is coming not just from the physical eyes, but from that Agya Chakra. They will quite literally see that, no, there is God. That is God behind there. So, let's go on. Also, he is the Lord of immortality. Well, that's easy. He is the Lord of immortality. So, immortal. Human beings, really all beings, you could say, wish to be, strive to be immortal. Now, what does that mean? There's a difference between the concept of immortality versus eternality. Most human beings, thinking again in a very, very self-centered sort of way, think in terms of immortality. That we have always existed, people are not very interested in. Unless for some reason to get giggles, they will do some past life regression, for example. Otherwise, people don't really care about the fact that, I have always existed. Rather, fearing death, having this fear of death, to kind of paraphrase Ernest Becker, to have this fear of death. People will say, I wish I had immortality. I wish that as of this moment I would never die. Well, understanding that this is what many, many living beings aspire toward. Well, he is the Lord of immortality. But really, philosophically speaking, of course, we understand that immortality is simply a warped way of interpreting the concept of eternality from the perspective of illusion. So, in actuality, he is the Lord of eternality. This is God. He is not just, it's interesting. It's not merely that God is eternal. It's not that God, the subject, is the attribute. Okay? It's not merely that the subject is the attribute. That wouldn't even make sense. It's not merely that God is eternal. Is God the personification of eternality? One could say, but no, God is actually beyond even that. Is God the source of eternality? Yes, he's that too. But more, this states it very, very specifically. He is the Lord of immortality or eternality. Meaning what? Eternality itself is subservient to God. So in other words, in comparison to God as, let's say, the Atman of this relationship, eternality itself is the external feature and subservient to God. This is an amazing statement. Such is the nature of Purusha. Let's go on. That which grows profusely by food is also the Purusha. That which grows profusely by food. What does this mean? This has two senses. The primary sense is all living beings. So in other words, indeed, when you look at all living beings, because who does not consume food? Everyone consumes food. If you're alive, you consume food. If you're human, if you're an animal, if you're a tree, if you're an amoeba, if you're anything you can think of that is alive must consume food of some sort. So, in other words, you look at any living being, you look past that living being, deep within that living being, what do you see? First, you see the body. You get past the body. You go deeper. What do you see? You see the Atman. Do you stop there? Yes or no? No. No. What do you see when you go past the Atman? Paramatman. So there we go. You look at any living being, ultimately, you look deeply enough with your mystic vision, your yogic vision, you see God. But more, God is also the prana that is there within food. This is also something that we will find echoed within many, many, many of the Upanishads as well. So that which grows profusely by food. So that means the living beings, but it also means how do the living beings grow as a result of that food. In the Upanishads, it explains this. There is prana that is there within food, within air, within sunlight, etc. There is cosmic prana as well. So God is that, but more, God is beyond that. God is the source of that. All that is subservient to God, the Purusha. Let's go on. Let me check the time. All right. It's executive decision time. I'm going to stop there for today. The reason why is because, even though interestingly, the tradition is that even the Purusha Sukta can be broken up into various sections, each of which is comprised of a certain number of verses. The first section being comprised of 5 verses. In actuality, I'm going to break this section up into subsections as well. These 2 verses that we just went through are on a very specific theme. Now we're going to go on a different theme, what the next verses are coming up. So rather than doing the disservice of trying to break those up into the future, we'll stop here for now, and the next time we get together, we're going to start with what is in actuality a new sub-theme within the Purusha Sukta. So let's stop there for now. And indeed, we will continue with this the next time that we get together. And like I always say, whenever we do these long series, when will this series end? When it ends. It's 24 verses, ultimately, that we're going to look at. We're going to be providing our audience with a full commentary on the entire Purusha Sukta in accordance with the Siddhanta, the ultimate philosophical conclusion and the teachings thereof of the totality of the Vedic scriptures. That's what we will be doing over the course of this series. But we'll stop here for now. And with that, for a short time, because we're a little bit over, I would like to see if there are any questions that anyone has. Either anyone here in our audience, who are here in our temple, or online as well. If you have any actual questions, please feel free to ask them. As I always have to say, I know that there is a little bit of a delay, so as I ask people for questions, I won't be seeing the questions for maybe 30 seconds after, and that's nice because it gives me a little opportunity to have some water. Nice. Here are a lot of very good questions that are streaming in, and I will absolutely ask these. Some of these are quite philosophical, some are very practical, and we welcome all questions, actually. The practical questions are as important as the philosophical ones. I've made that very clear to people many times in the past. But this is the first question. Namaste, Shri Acharya-ji. I have 2 questions. 1, how do the Rishis receive revelations? And 2, is Zoroaster considered to be a heretic? Very nice. Very good. Whoever is close, could someone please grab a copy of The Vedic Way of Knowing God and give that to me? First of all, to answer your first question, I'll wait till the book arrives here, and then I'll answer your first question. Thank you very much. This is actually a much dumbed down version of my PhD dissertation. It's called The Vedic Way of Knowing God. And again, I made it easier for general public to understand. And in this, I talk about precisely what I call the Rishi phenomenon. So indeed, I speak about this to a very great extent, to the point of almost 350 pages, actually, of this book. And that is, how is it that the Rishis have the ability epistemologically, perceptually, phenomenologically, psychologically even, in every way, to be individuals who start off as imperfect and yet come to the point of knowing the perfect. Beings who are finite and yet have the ability to not only know, but to reveal to other finite beings what is the nature of the infinite. So indeed, I speak about this in this book, in the Vedic Way of Knowing God. And I will give you a very quick summation. The Rishis are individuals who, if you read the stories, the biographies, one could say, contained within the Vedic scriptures of any and all of these Rishis, these are, for the most part, there are a few exceptions, very few beings who were just always perfect. And if anything, they come here from the transcendent realm. But the vast majority of Rishis are individuals who start off as human beings. They start off like anyone else, as human beings within the material world. To the point where, indeed, some of them, I'll give you one very stark example, Valmiki. Valmiki was a Rishi who revealed the Ramayana. So this being the case, he was an individual who was very imperfect. Indeed, he was a thief when he started off his life. But he met Narada Muni, who encouraged him to become a yogi, practice meditation, practice sadhana, meditate upon the name specifically of Rama, 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 what is called Taraka mantra. And he did this for all of his life, to the point where, indeed, he became not only a self-realized soul, he became indeed not just someone who had God consciousness, Brahma Vidya, but he became someone who became, and now this is the important distinguishing attribute of a liberated yogi, let's say a mere liberated yogi versus a Rishi. A mere liberated yogi is just that, a yogi who has achieved liberation. A Rishi, on the other hand, is someone who serves a very special function. And that is that they become, to use the English, a transparent via medium. They become an individual who they have a special purpose. And it is to perfectly reveal that which is eternal Shabda, the eternal word of God, in such a way that humans can now have access to it. What they do with their spiritual psychic frame, with their being, their locus of being, is they become like unto a window. That is, that they don't lose themselves, they remain who and what they are. But like the window, which again has its own constitutional existence, it has its own identity. You can go up to a window, you can rap on the window, you can feel the window, you can see the window if you really look enough. But the window serves a specific function. The window exists such that you can look through it to the other side of what is outside the window. This is the function that the Rishi has. They become such a being such that they don't lose their individual identity, but now they are serving a function such that now accessing that Shabda, that divine word of God, in perfect sonic form, in perfect sonic vibration, spiritual sonic vibration, they now have the ability to reveal that to the world. How do they reveal this? First, also sonically, that is, they recite what we now call a scripture. But then eventually this gets written down in literary form and goes from Shabda, sound vibration, to Shastra, written scripture. This is how the Rishis do it. Now, as far as all the mechanics of how they do it, that's in here. And I mean quite literally. All the mechanics of how they do this, I wrote about in the Vedic Way of Knowing God. It's too much to go into in a simple live stream like this. So when you have a chance, go to dharmacentral.com, purchase this book, and if you really want to know quite literally how they did it, I explain sentence by sentence by sentence how they did it. And the second thing, is Zoroaster considered a heretic? Yes. That's simple, yes. Yeah. And let me not just give a cute little quick answer like that. Let me explain what is meant by this. Within the context of the Kali Yuga, which began a little bit over 5,100 years ago, within the context of the Kali Yuga, what we find is this. Previous to the Kali Yuga, there was one quote-unquote religion, and that was Sanatana Dharma. That was the eternal natural way. There was only one. The idea of denominations did not exist previous to roughly 5,100 years ago. What we find is exclusively within the context of the Kali Yuga. Again, this did not exist. This is exclusive to the Kali Yuga. And this beginning, roughly the first millennium of the Kali Yuga. So the first 1,000 years of the Kali Yuga. So approximately 4,000 years ago. What we begin to see is denominationalism. We begin to see offshoots of Sanatana Dharma. And let me make this clear. Every single religion that exists in the world today is either a direct offshoot of, or an offshoot of an offshoot, or an offshoot of an offshoot of an offshoot, and you can keep saying that, of Sanatana Dharma. All that there was Sanatana Dharma. The first offshoot, one could say historically, was Zoroastrianism. Zarathustra being an individual who was not happy with Vedic religion, which, there's no one who would even dare to try to refute this. Every scholar knows this, every person who has studied religion. The religion of Persia previous to Zoroastrianism was Vedic. Again, all the parallels are there. The Avesta is similar to the Veda. The language is very similar. They worship the same gods, the same goddesses. They believe in Asha versus Dharma, but it means the same thing. It means natural law, etc., etc., etc. The religion of Persia, previous to Zoroaster and Zoroastrianism, was Sanatana Dharma. When he came about, he was not happy with what he saw religiously. He decided to create quote-unquote reforms. Always be wary of reformers. Especially in religion. We're talking about religion very specifically. Individuals who call themselves reformers are 99.9% of the time perverters, but they call it reform. This is true of every religion on the face of the earth. This is true of offshoots, etc., etc., etc. Well, Zoroaster, decided to be a reformer. He wasn't happy with Vedic religion. He decided to remake it to his own liking. So without going into the history of Zoroastrianism, which we can for a long time, yes, he is someone who broke away from pure Sanatana Dharma and created his own dumbed-down version of Sanatana Dharma, as did the Buddha, as did not Mahavira himself, but later followers of Zoroastrianism, starting approximately 2 centuries after Mahavira. Jainism also became a dumbed-down version of Sanatana Dharma, as is the case with Sikhism as well, etc., etc. So I hope that answers the question. Very good. Here's another question. Namaste Shri Acharyaji. Should we keep any small murtis used for travel on our altar and serve them in the same way as our home murtis? Very nice question. Many people have murtis that they use in travel, that they just bring with them when they're traveling. And sometimes it will be smaller copies of the larger murtis that they have. Sometimes it will be different murtis altogether, etc. But many people do this. Indeed, I have murtis myself. I have very small murtis of Radha Krishna. When I'm traveling, I bring them with me. And I set them up in my, whether it's a hotel room or wherever it is. And I do pujas to them each day. So this is a very common thing to do. And let me say several things. The most respectful thing to do is if they're small enough, yes, keep them on your altar. But if you can't do this, then at the very least, if you're going to keep them packed away, let's say, and use them exclusively for when you're traveling, keep them in a place that is always very respectful, that's very clean. Have something, a little box, a little bag, something that you keep them in, and keep them in a special place. But indeed, you have to always have tremendous reverence for murtis, whether they are the established murtis of your altar or murtis that you travel with. Always treat them with reverence. And I'm sorry, can someone please take this book back from me? Just so I have a little bit more room here. Thank you very much. Very good. And with that, I see that there are indeed a few more questions here. Very good. Oh, 1 second. Here we go. Here's another very good question that I will answer. Dear Acharyaji, thank you for the talk. I got a bit confused about the aspect of God that permeates all reality. Can you please explain what is the conceptual difference between Brahman and Purusha? Excellent question, and there is indeed a difference. There certainly is a linguistic difference, as you can see, but then, as you say, conceptually, but not only conceptually, in reality, there is a distinction that is there between them. Brahman means God himself. It means several things, actually. It has, as is true for many of these words, primary, secondary, tertiary, and on meanings. When it comes to Brahman, Brahman, first and foremost, is a name of God. It is pointing to God in the general. It is like saying God in the English language. It's a very general, generic term. In the same way, this is what Brahman means. Also, however, it means Narayana, Brahman being non-distinct from Narayana. For some people, and this is not incorrect, Brahman sometimes is referring to, let's say, the more impersonal aspect of God. And even that impersonal aspect actually has several different words that are associated with it. So whether you're talking about pre-fall, that is before the Atman falls within the material world, you're talking about Brahma Jyoti, the light of God. And in this case, talking about the context within the material world, you're talking about Purusha. So this is the first thing. Brahman is more general. It means God in every single sense, and sometimes the impersonal feature of God, and indeed how God even interpenetrates all reality. Now, that's Brahman. With Purusha, on the other hand, and especially within this context of the Purusha Sukta, what is being spoken of is that aspect of Brahman that very specifically informs a singular Brahmanda or universe as the essence of that universe, as the soul, one could say, of that universe. To really understand this fully, one has to understand the idea of essentialism. This is an idea that atheists have been warring against for, again, roughly 200 years. And that is the idea that everything of vast importance has an essence to it. That is, its spirit. So I'll give some obvious examples. A nation, a true nation, not just a country, not just a meaningless country that was thrown together by politics. No, an actual nation, meaning a people who are autochthonous to that place, who have been there practically since the beginning of time. A nation in that sense has a spirit behind it. It has an essence that is the personification of that nation. Well, you could say this also about a universe. The universe has a spirit behind it. That is Purusha. That is the aspect of Brahman that is not just general, but that very specifically is the spirit, the essence of that universe. So I hope that makes sense. So on the one hand, there isn't a massive distinction between Brahman and Purusha because they are in actuality the same being. It is a perspectival and a functional difference, if one can understand the difference. Is Purusha Brahman? Is Brahman Purusha? Yes, on the one hand. On the other hand, why see the distinction? The distinction is one of functionality, and of perspective. So I hope that makes sense. Very good. Here's another good question. It's very nice, actually, that there are many questions dealing with specifically what we spoke about today. And it is, Namaste Shri Guru, can a spirit permeate other spirits, such as the spirit of the universe and the individual spirits within it? Generally speaking, no. Spirits do not permeate other spirits in a general sense. So in other words, if you were to look at, let's say, all Purushas all together, meaning Purusha meaning God, but remember how I started this talk. explaining how even the word Purusha has many meanings. It can mean God, it can mean each one of us. Each one of us is a mini Purusha, one could say. So looking at all Purushas together, can the Purushas all merge? Some of them merge, 3 of them merge, 1,000 of them merge together. Different individual Atmans, can we permeate one another? No. The answer is no. The only permeation that can happen is that of God, as God is there as the indwelling spirit within the Atman of all other living beings. That's the only way in which we can speak of this term of to permeate. So God only permeates other Atmans, not the other way around. So I hope that answers the question. Very good. So many good questions. Here's another one. Namaste Shri Acharyaji. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see this one on top. Let me read this one first. Namaste, dearest Acharyaji. How can we learn spirituality from the natural world without falling into the pitfalls of empiricism, law of the jungle, or cynically viewing the world as standing reserve? Very nice. This is a very good, very deeply philosophical question, actually, and one that I can definitely answer. First of all, to just kind of develop your question a little bit more, I believe what you're asking is, by looking at the world of nature around us, the natural world, how can an individual do this and not, let's say, become too enamored by the ideas of what we literally see as the external material world? And what does that mean? You mentioned some of the things here. Survival of the fittest, or how did you state it here? Law of the jungle, etc., the pitfalls of actual empiricism, just literally what we are seeing of nature with our eyes, what we are encountering, and all, even the lessons thereof. Because yes, if you look at nature, I always make this clear to people, you know, more New Agey types think that when you go into nature, and I'm barely joking, the more New Age types think that when you go into the natural world, what you're going to see are lions and tigers and birds all holding hands and loving each other, etc., and singing in harmony. No, what you see is beauty, enormous beauty, and you also see every animal trying to eat every other animal. You see both, good and bad. So indeed, I believe what you're asking is, viewing nature in a very real sort of way like this, how can one avoid just being cynical and just seeing those kinds of externals, but instead seeing beyond it and seeing the beauty that is there and ultimately God that is there? Well, again, this is the shariran that we were talking about. This is the idea that indeed when you view anything within the material world, what are you viewing? You're just viewing the external. But indeed, a person with a spiritual vision, again, like I was saying before, the atheist who just kind of looks and sees a beautiful vista, yes, that pleased my senses, very nice, let me go on now and do some stupid thing in the material world. No, rather than just seeing the externals and just seeing that, oh yes, nature also is vicious. Yes, there is survival of the fittest in nature, you know, etc., etc. Seeing beyond merely that, merely beyond the biological. You see, what we're talking about is the biological. And seeing beyond the biological, now we begin to see the spiritual. We begin to see Dharma itself. We begin to see that, oh yes, nature has within it both good and bad, but the entire myriad construct that we see there that we call nature, despite the fact that some is good, some is bad, some is beautiful, some is ugly, etc., the whole of it is a manifestation of Dharma, of natural law, such that all things really do work in harmony. Not in the New Age way, that again, the lions and the sheep and the birds are all holding hands, but no, in that there is a divine order that is there, that all beings do what they need to survive, with the idea that if you throw human beings into this equation as well, ultimately having survived, they will now also do their best to thrive spiritually. So when you look at nature in this way, seeing the Dharma that is behind all of nature, but then God who is behind all of Dharma itself, now we have the ability to view nature with a divine eye. So The spiritual person, interestingly, does not deny the more vicious aspects of nature. On the contrary, a spiritual person is absolutely aware of the more vicious aspects of nature. But we don't become cynical about it. On the contrary, we understand, why are these beings all eating each other, etc.? Well, these are all independent beings with independent will for whom it was their karma to be in that specific body. We understand that behind it all really is God. So thus, we recognize the empirical reality while seeing beyond the empirical reality. So I hope that makes sense. Maybe this will be the last question that I will answer, just due to time. We're at 3:30 now, 3:32 our time. And it is, Namaste Sri Acharyaji. After liberation, will we have our memories from all our lifetimes and our relationships we've made with other Atmans over time, such as spouses, children, pets, etc.? We will have access to all memories. Yes. Yes. However, interestingly, they won't be as important to us as we think. So let me explain this more in depth and more thoroughly. Upon liberation, we have full access to all of the inherent natural intrinsic abilities of soul. So whatever are the intrinsic abilities of Atman, which now we can scarcely even begin to touch, we can see them a little bit, we have full access to. One of these is omniscience. So it's interesting, the Vedic scriptures speak about this. Ramanuja, the greatest Vedic philosopher of all time, makes this very clear, that the liberated soul has omniscience, knows everything. This includes knowing all of our past lives. However, while we have access to all of this knowledge of, oh yes, who was I in my last life, the life before that, stretching all the way to the beginning, and who are all of my relations, who was my wife, who was my child, my this, my that, in all these previous lives, who were my friends. Yes, we have access to all this upon liberation. However, interestingly, it's not of great importance to us. You see, it's of importance to us now in our state of bondage. Why is that the case? Because it's fascinating to us. We would like to know, oh yes, who was I in my last life? Oh, what did I do? What sort of interesting adventures did I have, etc., etc. So it's of importance to us now. But upon liberation, we understand that our entire sojourn within this material world was something akin to a dream. You know, you wake up from a dream. And how interested are you in the contents of that dream? And for that matter, all the dreams you've had. Oh, you may have some interest, but then you go on with your life. You don't want to live your life in such a way that you're always thinking about your dreams. Rather, you then go on with your life and more important things. Well, in the same way, it is the case that when we achieve liberation, do we know about all of our previous lives? Yes, we do. But it's just not very relevant to us. And that's amazing to think, because of course for people in illusion it's very relevant. Oh my Lord, I want to know, was I Queen Cleopatra? Was I this great warrior, was I King Arthur? In our illusion that's of importance to us. Upon liberation it becomes almost meaningless. But can we know? Oh, we will know everything. So I hope that answers the question. Very good. Nice. So with that we will stop here for now. And again, as we continue with these live streams, every Sunday we will be continuing with the Purusha Sukta. We only got through 2 of the verses. The next time we'll try to get through more. And again, in time, hopefully a few weeks, we will go through the entire Purusha Sukta. So I thank you all for being here with me to go through these. Just a few things I want to say before we end, and that is, first of all, we indeed have a Discord server. If you have not joined our Discord server and you would like to learn more about Sanatana Dharma, please feel free to join our Discord server. I haven't had a chance to look to see if the link is available in the chat, but if it is, please join our Discord server. And basically what that is is a forum where people can discuss 24/7 all the various aspects of Sanatana Dharma. People can also join in our many discussion groups. We have live discussion groups that go on our Discord server and many, many other wonderful things that are there. Also, please visit our website, dharmacentral.com, when you can. And when you go there, you'll see that our many books are available, such as Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way. The other one that I showed you, The Vedic Way of Knowing God. I've written 13 books now thus far. They are all available there on Dharma Central. Also, if you would be so willing to do so, we indeed are a movement. We have a non-profit religious movement called the International Sanatana Dharma Society. We need your donations to continue to grow and to expand. Indeed, I always have to remind people that this is not a YouTube channel. And then when the live stream is over, we all kind of go away and go to sleep. We have a movement, and this YouTube channel, Dharma Nation, is one tiny aspect of what we do. We do many, many, many things. Indeed, like I've said, we're in 70 nations throughout the world, and we have multiple projects. The International Sanatana Dharma Society exists for one purpose, and that is to reestablish Vedic civilization upon the earth and to help people to grow spiritually. That being the case, we do need your help. If you can kindly donate to the International Sanatana Dharma Society, even a one-time donation, and it can be anything from $5 to $5 million, anything in between, please feel free to do so by visiting our website, dharmacentral.com. And if you look on the menu, you'll see that there's a link there where you can donate. If you would like to become a tithing member of the International Sanatana Dharma Society, where you take a pledge to just give a donation once a month. And again, it could be anything from $5 to $5 million, anything in between. Also, you can find where you can become a monthly tithing member of the ISDS on dharmacentral.com. So with that, again, everyone, I thank you very much for being here with us. Please take very good care until we come together again. And namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana.
Jaya Sriman Narayana.
Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna.
Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna.
Jaya Shri Guru.
Jaya Shri Guru.
Sanatana Dharma Jayate.
Sanatana Dharma Jayate.
Dharma Rashtra Jayate.
Dharma Rashtra Jayate.
Suravangsha Jayate.
Surya Vangsha Jayate.
International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate.
International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate.
Victory to Dharma in our world. Evam Bhavatu. May such victory be so. And so it shall be. And everyone, from now until the next time that we get together, again, I ask you all to take very good care of yourselves and to repeat what I have been repeating. The words of Bhagavan Sri Krishna from chapter 18, verse 66 from Bhagavad Gita. Ma Shuchaha. Do not fear.